Hi, welcome back to Guitar Discoveries. Today I want to talk about funky, magical, old, vintage acoustic guitars. I'm talking about the ones who have names that you may not recognize or names that you might think are suspicious. There are tons of them out there, right? There were many, many guitars that were made between, let's say, 1900 and 1970 that may look really odd. They may have some different characteristics than we're used to today, but their wood is likely to be aged, and with a little bit of TLC, they can really be incredible guitars. So what I'm holding right here is a really unique little beast. This is a guitar made by a company called Espana. I mean, who's heard of it, right? Turns out Espana guitars were made in Finland, and they were imported to the United States by a company called B&J that imported a heck of a lot of guitars from mostly Scandinavia. At some point, they were connected to Hagström, which had a line of Norwegian-made acoustic guitars. But these guitars were being made, they were sort of the overflow guitars that were being made by a company called Landola in Finland. And Landola guitars were really nice, good woods, high quality build, everything else. Well, I don't know what this guitar went through or where it was stored or what the story is, but I've rarely seen a top that is warped like this. This reminds me of an old 45 that's been sitting in the sun. Maybe it's sat in the sun because there's a huge warp in this part of the wood here. The bridge is kind of pulling up, the wood's pushing there. There's a dip down here in front of the bridge. All that stuff is not that surprising for a guitar this was probably built in the early 60s is my best guess based on everything I've read online. Now here's what's interesting. These old guitars, you can go online and often you can find out even about off-brands. So this is a guitar that we found in a little guitar shop here in the Bay Area. This shop had a luthier that owned and ran it, and he was scouring all of the flea markets and garage sales and things that he could find in the Bay Area, and he would find these funky guitars, many of them with odd names and brands, and then he would bring them back to his shop and he'd work on them. And he would, in general, do kind of the minimal amount of work required to make it playable and functional. Well, this one turns out to be beautiful. Great tone, a lot of bass. I can feel the resonance in me. And, it's a fairly thin body. It's very light. But it has all this wonderful aged checking and cracking on the front. There was a spot in the back where it must have gotten slammed against something. It's seen better days in a way, but that's part of what makes it a really cool guitar. Now this one belongs to my son, Eli, he's a producer, goes under the name Jaka Productions. But a couple of things make this unique. It's actually the same bout width and upper shoulder width as a classical guitar, even though it has a little bit more of an acoustic look, like a Martin OM kind of thing. It's actually the same size as a classical guitar. It fits perfectly in a classical guitar case. So that's kind of nice. It's not quite as small as a parlor. It has a really fat neck. And I'm talking about, it really fills up your hand. It feels more like a classical guitar than it does like a typical acoustic. So anyway, unusual guitar. My point is really to bring up that there are many guitars that are oddballs like this. Now there were quite a lot of these made and imported into the United States by a company in New York. So you might find an Espana. It's very possible, an Espana acoustic. They made classicals and they made steel strings as well. They called these folk guitars. I just want to focus in on not being afraid of these. Now, particularly because you can get a great deal on them, you can kind of build into the cost bringing them to a luthier and having them be worked on. In this case, we've had a new bridge put in. We had a new nut put in at some point, and recently we put in a pickup, which I'm going to be talking about in another episode. But here it is, this really fun guitar that, hold on. has a really great bite. This is a great recording guitar. So I just want to say, don't be afraid of funky oddball guitars. If you can get a good deal on it, figure you're going to bring it to your luthier and maybe spend $100 to do some things to it. Could be as much as $150 if you put a little more energy in. But you're going to get something very special. And I personally think the uniqueness of an off-brand, as long as it plays well and sounds good and does what you want it to do, is really a great way to go. So that's my endorsement for the oddballs, for the outcasts, for the ones that got thrown away, the orphans. Go pay them some attention and really think about if it might work for you, and then give it some TLC and bring it back to life. There's your guitar discovery. Really love sharing tips and tricks. Please go over to my site at guitardiscoveries.com. I post all the videos there. There's a ton of information, links to my own music, and I would just absolutely love to share all of that with you, and look forward to seeing you next time when I'm going to be talking about that pickup right there.